So now we're going to have a look at our zipper pocket. This is quite a big zipper pocket, and the reason it's quite a big zipper pocket is because we've got quite a lot of bag to turn through the zipper pocket. So we start with our zipper facing panel, and on the wrong side I have non-woven fusible interfacing. And if you haven't got non-woven, don't worry, you can use woven fusible interfacing, your G700 or your SF101. I like to use a non-woven interfacing. It just makes a really crisp fold. This is something that one of my lovely testers, Trudy, mentioned to me a long time ago. Said, have you ever tried? And I said, oh no, but I gave it a try and I was absolutely converted. So I'd like to take the glory for it. I can't, it's not my idea. It's something that Trudy told me, so I now always use a non-woven interfacing. So what we've done on this, and it's quite hard to see, I think, no you can see it, is I've done a line centrally from one short end to the other. This is 2 inches wide, so 1 inch from either side, whichever side you choose. I've done a line 1/8 of an inch above and an 1/8 of an inch below, and then another line that's 1 inch in from either end, and I've created a rectangle. At the end of the rectangle I've done a sort of a triangle bit inside of there. Now if I'm honest, I don't usually do it, but because I know not everybody's done a zipper pocket before, it's easier if you do mark that little triangle. The little triangle, the point of the triangle sits on the central line, and I'm guessing it's probably 3/4 of an inch away from that 1 inch line or thereabouts. So you're going to need your zipper facing panel, you're going to need your 2 zipper lining panels and your number 3 zip. Now if you wanted to use a number 5 zip, what I would say is make your central line, do one line 1/8 of an inch below, do the second line a 1/4 inch above, so you end up with a 3/8 of an inch deep gap. I like a 1/4 inch because I don't want, you know, zippers are not the most attractive things, they're useful, but I don't want to see miles and miles of zipper tape, I just want to see the zipper teeth. So I prefer a smaller aperture for my zipper. Now when it comes to zippers, you can use either pre-made ones like this, or you can use the zippers on a coil. I have got a video in my collection showing you how to put the zipper pulls on if you need that. Have a look in the bag making hints and tips and techniques. So we're going to start, we're going to put the lining pieces and the zipper out of the way. I'm going to grab our main lining panel that we've already put our slip pockets on. Now, why do we do this first? Why do we do the slip pockets first? The reason I do slip pockets first is because I have so many times done my zipper pocket, added my slip pocket, and realised that when I've done all these stitching up and down, I'm actually going through the lining of my zipper pocket, so I end up having to unpick, so it just doesn't really work for me. So I'm going to fold this in half just to find the centre with the 2 short ends together, and I've still got that central fold showing on my lining panel, so I'm going to pop my zipper facing panel right sides down so I can see that rectangle that I've drawn, so that the bottom edge butts up against the top of my pocket. Now if you'd like to pin that in place, you can. This is just dragging everything off because it's just such a big bit of fabric. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch down both of the long sides of my rectangle, not that central line, just the long sides. I'm not stitching the short ends. Zipper pocket apertures have a nasty habit of puckering at the corners, and I find that doing it this way means it doesn't pucker. I think using the non-woven interface also helps with that. So I'm just reducing my stitch length down a little bit because I'm not top stitching, this is part of construction, so I've reduced it down to 3. Go all the way down on the top line, slowing down to make sure I get slap bang in the corner, and a couple of stitches just to secure my threads. And I'm going to do exactly the same on the bottom line. You must make sure that you drop your needle right into that corner, otherwise you'll end up with a slightly wonky looking rectangle. It will look like somebody sat on it. my scissors behind me. So now we have stitched down the long sides, but not down these short ones. I'm just gonna fold that up so that I can then make a small cut, which I've made on that central line, and then I'm just going to use my scissors and cut along that central line, which is why we didn't stitch on the central line, until I get to the point of the triangle that I made, and then I'm going to go out towards my stitching. Do not go outside of the rectangle and don't cut into your stitching. You need to be really careful. You need to be as close as you can be, but not cutting into the stitching. I'm going to do exactly the same at the other end. Let me just see if I can, so you can see there that that little triangle is kind of free, and we have the hole that goes right the way across. Let's just move those. Grab my pressing mat. Right, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run my finger along the top edge of that facing panel. Because this is a non-woven, it will crease. It's a bit more like paper, so it will crease if you run your fingernail down it, or if you've got something that you perhaps like to, even a, well, I think it's called a bone. It's used in quilting. You can run one of those along there just to, you can see it actually just folds over. I'm going to do exactly the same on the bottom edge. And it just gives a nice, you can see there that the facing now is kind of standing up. I'm going to take the end of the facing and pop it through the hole. Same with the other end of the facing. Now if you, from behind, from the wrong side, if you give it a little tug, you find that those facing panels, the facing panel will kind of almost push itself into the hole. Just because I said it didn't do it perfectly, but sometimes it does. And what you're going to do is use your fingers again and roll that facing so that it's right behind the main lining panel. I'm doing this at a very strange angle. And again, you can finger press it because that papery non-woven fusible interfacing will fold and it's nice and crisp. I tend to do the top and then the bottom, or the bottom and then the top. Trying to do both sides at the same time for me just doesn't work. So once I've got it and I think it's nice and straight, I'll grab my iron and I'll press. How many times do you see people showing the inside of their bag and their zipper aperture isn't nice and straight and rectangular? It's something that bugs me intensely. I really do believe that the inside of your bag should look as good as the outside of your bag. So it's worth taking just a little bit of time to make sure you've got it spot on. So I'm happy with that. And what you want to have is lovely sharp corners on the end of your zipper aperture. Which I think you can probably see is exactly what we have. It's lovely and even, and the aperture is nice and rectangle, and we don't have any puckers in the corner. Trying to iron out the puckers with the top tip of your iron is just a nightmare. So I remove my pressing mat, and I'm now going to find my zipper and my zipper pocket linings. So I have two zipper pocket linings. They're exactly the same size. And I'm going to lay my zipper, first of all, I have pressed my zipper, just make sure it opens and closes. I have pressed this. I always press my zippers. It stops them going bumpy and wobbly, so it's worth pressing. Nylon zippers can be pressed without any problem. If you're using a metal zipper, do be careful if you're pressing it, because the zipper teeth will get hot and you will end up with third-degree burns. So I'm going to take my pressed and working zipper and I'm going to lay it right side up on the right side of one of my lining panels. And I'm matching up the top edge of the zipper with the top edge of the lining panel. Now, if you wanted to pin it in place, then you can do. I'm not going to. I'm also a bit of a, I don't particularly like double-sided tape. I know a lot of people use a lot of double-sided tape for pockets. I don't. But I'm going to stitch that in place using, I'm just going to open up that zipper a bit though, so I don't hit the zipper pull, using a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. A scant 1/4 inch seam allowance is just less than 1/4 inch. So now just coming down to the zipper pull, so I'm just going to leave my needle in, raise my foot. I do apologise about the traffic noise. But if we didn't have the traffic noise, then we'd have a melting person sewing. I'm already at that funny age where I get kind of warm anyway. So I've stitched that on. I think you can see because I've used red thread. And it's on the top edge of my zipper pocket lining panel. And this is the right side of the panel. So I'm taking the second panel, right side up. And with the first panel, I'm going to kind of pull out that zipper. And I'm going to lay the zipper again onto the top edge of my second lining panel. Now, they're going to be two different lengths, and that's fine, but you need to make sure that the sides match up. And again, if you want to clip it or pin it, then please do. And I'm going to stitch that in place again with a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. A scant 1/4 inch is just less than 1/4 inch. And when I come down here to where the zipper pull is, I'm just going to raise my foot, move the zipper pull out of the way, and carry on stitching. And now we have a zipper fully inserted between the two lining pieces. This is the right side, this is the wrong side, but the zipper pull is on this side. So I'm going to grab my pressing mat, which has been on the floor, so it's now covered in bits of fluff. I'm going to lay my zipper so that the zipper pull is facing upwards, and I'm just going to press open that seam allowance on either side of the zipper. Again, plastic zipper, quite good to be ironed. Metal zippers, just be careful because the teeth get very hot and they hold the heat for ages. I'm just going to turn it over, because sometimes when you do that, you get a little kind of a pucker along the side here. And this is the inside of your zipper pocket, so you don't want any puckers showing. This technique means that you don't have any zipper tape showing inside the pocket. Again, I have a video in my collection that shows you two different methods. One which is they're both as good as each other. They both insert the zipper, but one will mean that you have no zipper tape showing on the inside of your pocket, and the other one will mean you do have zipper tape showing on the inside of your pocket. It's a personal preference. I much prefer no zipper tape showing. I know nobody really looks in their pockets and checks for those sort of things, but if I know it's there, then it bothers me. So my zipper is just a little bit longer than my pocket, so I'm just going to open it up and make a couple of stitches across the end here to hold those two pieces together. And you can see now that the zipper is sitting nice and flat between the two lining pieces. So I'm going to lay that on my table with my zipper so it's closing to my left, right, yep, just double checking. If you're left-handed, then have it the other way around so that it's closing towards the right. It's it doesn't really matter, but it's just for ease of use, that's the easiest way to have it. Now we're going to take our lining piece that we've made that lovely aperture in, and we're going to lay over the top of the zipper teeth. Now this is where a lot of people like to use double-sided tape or a little bit of glue, or that sort of thing. I don't. I just position it so that my zipper teeth are central. I'm going to change my foot though. And for the purists amongst you, I apologise. Yes, I use a Teflon foot for almost everything, even though this is not faux leather. It's just force of habit, and actually I found that sewing with a Teflon foot makes no difference than sewing with a metal foot when I'm sewing on fabric. The only time that really it's only linings that I do with fabric. So let's just make sure that that's absolutely spot on. And what we're going to do is we are going to just going to move that out of the way. We're going to stitch all the way around the outside of that zipper aperture. Now I've got long threads on the top and the bottom of my machine because we're not going to back stitch, we're going to bury our threads. We don't want there to be an obvious start or finish to our stitching. And the reason I like to not use double-sided tape is because I can just kind of jiggle it a little bit if it looks like it's going a bit wonky. I'm increasing my stitch length again. And I'm stitching around that pocket without any back stitching, using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. The pocket linings are still open, so they're one either side of the zipper, and that's how they should be. One of your pocket linings will kind of poke out the top here. When you get to the end there, take it slowly because you will be going over the zipper teeth. You may need to hand crank over the zipper teeth depending on how your machine likes that lump. Some machines are not so keen as others to do. Oh, and I appear to have a broken thread. Okay, so let's have a look at how we fix that, shall we? I'm going to take an awl, and you can see that it's just the top thread that seems to have broken for some unexplainable reason. So I'm just going to trim off. So I'm going to take an awl, and I'm just going to just move the camera down, use my awl to pull out some of the stitches, and I'm pulling out probably about an inch and a half, so that I can see there where it's suddenly shredded. So I've got an inch or so of thread. I'm going to use a self-threading needle. I'm going to pop that through to the back of my work, and I'm going to tie it off with the bobbin thread. Once it's tied, I'm just going to trim it off to about 1/4 inch. You will not see that. So now we have, wrong way. We have a line of holes where we were doing our stitching and where we've just removed. So I'm just going to take off the end of that thread because I think that's possibly a fault, I don't know. Thread up the machine again. Again, long thread on the top and the bottom. And I'm going to try and drop my needle into the last hole that we had a stitch through. So lift my foot up and I just literally put my needle down very slowly until it's gone right into that last hole. And in theory, if you haven't changed your stitch length, you should be able to stitch in the same holes as you've already made. In fabric, it doesn't really matter quite so much because you can give it a rub with your fingernail and the holes will kind of seal up again. I'm just going to carry on stitching. When I get to the zipper pull, I'm just going to raise my foot, move the pull out of the way. Come to the end here. I want to come up to the short end. I'm just going to hand crank it over there. And what I want to try and do is land in the same hole as I started in. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you have to kind of manipulate a little bit. I'm going to pull my work out. If I could get hold of the bottom thread, I'd be very lucky. And trim off those ends. Now I've got the threads from the beginning and the start of my stitching on the front here. So I'm going to pop those into a self-threading needle and pop them back through the hole that is the one that I basically started and stopped in. And where we did our repair, I'm going to take that long thread from the front and do the same thing again. I'm going to take it through that hole that we started in, and go through to the back and tie off with the bobbin thread. And it means you will have an invisible repair for your shredded thread. Same would apply if you run out of bobbin thread. You just pull the stitches back so that you've got a little bit to tie off. Don't be tempted not to tie it off though, because not tying it off can be a disaster, because at some point in the future that stitch will, you can bet your life that stitch will fail because it's not secure. So I'm now tying off with the bobbin thread and the thread from the top. There we go. See, even I have these problems. So now we have a perfectly fitted pocket and you can't see any back stitching or double stitching where I've had that slight hiccup. It happens. And my zipper works beautifully. And on the back of my work, I have my 2 lining panels still sitting open. I'm going to take the top lining panel and I'm going to pull it down over the bottom lining panel. And you can see there that there's a slight extra bit there, and I'm just going to trim that off. Now, I have had people say to me, why don't you just make the 2 panels a different size? Yeah, I could do that. It just makes a lot more for you as the sewer to think about, remembering which one you're going to put at the top and the bottom. So for the sake of ½ inch of fabric, really isn't worth the hassle. So pressing that again. What we're going to do, I've got threads everywhere, is we're going to make a sort of a 1/4 inch hem on our bottom edge of both of these pocket linings. I don't measure it, I just eyeball it. As long as they're both the same, That's what's really important. You want the two bottom folded edges to be exactly the same. Now the reason that I do this is because it makes it so much tidier and easier for when you have turned your bag and you're going to seal up the bottom of your pocket. So that's one that's been folded over, and now I'm going to do exactly the same with the one on the bottom. I'm just finger pressing it first, and I'll get my iron and give it a press. It doesn't have to be spot on perfect, it just needs to be there or thereabouts. Don't get too hung up on it being a perfect 1/4 of an inch. As long as the two bases, the two bottom folds are pretty much the same length, it will be fine. There are some times when you need to be precise, and there are some times when 1/8 of an inch doesn't matter. And this is one of those where it doesn't really impact greatly. So you can see they're pretty much the same length, and that's good. That's what we want them to be. So now I'm going to turn my right side up, and I'm going to pull the side away, and you should be able to see the facing panel and the side of your pocket. And what we're going to do, well, I'm going to change my foot first, because although I always sew with a Teflon foot, I don't like sewing with a zipper foot. I know some people do. It's not my thing. I like my ordinary foot. I know where I'm at with that. I've got my thread caught around my needle. So I'm going to stitch down over that facing panel, over those pocket lining panels, making sure that I don't unfold those folds that I've just made, and I'm going to do that at 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm reducing the size of my stitch because this is construction, not top stitching. When you do this, you should be able to stitch more or less over those little triangles that are that you didn't stitch on the sides. Sometimes it depends how central you've actually put your zipper lining. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I can get it and sometimes I can't. There we go. If you've got any excess zipper or facing, just trim it off. You don't want any bulk inside of your bag that you don't need. I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side, so I'm just going to pull the side away, and again you can see I have the end of my zipper, my facing panel and my zipper pocket linings, and I'm just going to stitch up the side of the pocket linings using 1/4 inch seam allowance. And again, if you have any zipper, you can just remove it. And that's your zipper pocket completed.